Hello, hello, and welcome to the Awana, Tennessee Network. I'm Hunter Williams. I serve as the Awana missionary for Central and Southeast Tennessee, and I am so excited for today's episode because we have a special guest. Typically, we've had Awana missionaries come on to share tips and ideas, and today we're branching out. We're getting outside the box, and we're having someone outside of the Awana realm speak to us today. Now, you might be thinking, Hunter, how can someone outside of Awana share tips about Awana ministry? Well, here's the thing. My heartbeat has always been to have pastors, ministry leaders, different folks come on to share tips and ideas to give us a holistic approach to our ministry so that they can thrive. And today, I know our guest is going to give us some great insight. It's Zach Wyatt. He serves as the director for the Youth Leaders Collective, and Zach has served in youth ministry for over 20 years. Not only that, Zach is a very good friend of mine, and I know his heart, and he is just a very, very loving, caring person who has a heart to see youth ministries and ministers in general do well. And so I'm excited for this conversation. Let's go ahead and meet Zach Wyatt. Well, Zach, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so pumped that you're able to join us today.
All right. Thanks so much, Hunter. Really happy to join you today, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And, kind of what I said in the intro, it's interesting. I'm having a non-Awana person on an Awana podcast, but it's perfect because what you're going to share about pretty much explains the reason why I'm doing it. But many of the listeners, they may not know who Zach Wyatt is or what your ministry is. And so before we get into the conversation, I just want you to share a little bit about your story and how God led you into youth ministry and to serving leaders, because that plays beautifully into what we're going to talk about today.
No, first, I just appreciate the opportunity to be with you today, Hunter. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and have been here coming up on 42 years and have never left. Love Chattanooga. My wife and I have lived here, and so grew up in the church. My parents raised me in the church. Grew up in a SBC church, and but wasn't really discipled. I walked an aisle, prayed the prayer, got wet, got baptized, did all that, and my parents just they were good people, and just felt like taking me to church was the right thing to do, and that's what they did as they were growing up. And but as I said, I never really was discipled, and kind of floundered as a teenager, and didn't make wise choices. But when I was a senior in high school, God put a youth pastor in my life who discipled me, who walked alongside me. I can't tell you many of his messages, but I can tell you how many times he invited me over to his house, which was all the time.
Yeah.
And he just really invested in me over the next year and a half. And that had a huge impact in my life. And how I saw his marriage. I saw how he interacted with his kids. I saw just that, and that had a huge impact in my life. When I was a sophomore in college, the church that I grew up in, the pastor invited me to come and basically be what they called the youth coordinator. And there were 5 students in the church, and the youth coordinator role paid $25 a month, and they took taxes out on it. And I said, I'm sold. I'm going to do this job, and I just kind of fell into youth ministry. I loved what my youth pastor done in my life. And our youth ministry over the next several years was made up of a lot of students from broken homes, students from foster homes. And I loved it. I just had a heart for those students. I wasn't going to school to be in youth ministry, college to be in youth ministry. Never thought that's what I would do. I thought I'd just do this while I was in college. And here I am over 20 years later and still connected to youth ministry, and don't have any plans of not being involved in youth ministry. And I just kind of fell into it and just never got out. I'm still falling into that well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just kind of my story. I'm married, been married for 17 years. We have 2 boys, 15 and 10. My wife's a teacher, and this is just the life God's given us, and we're so grateful.
That's awesome. That is so cool. So, been in youth ministry 20 years, went from that $25 a month
Yes.
to where you're at. That's just, it's beautiful how God works. And I love your phrasing of, I just fell into youth ministry. Because God, He does that. He puts people in our lives, situations in our lives to guide us where He wants us. So
Mm.
I love that, man. And so now you're in the Youth Leaders Collective, which it was a different name when I was, part of it and knew about it. So for those who don't know what the Youth Leaders Collective is, I'd love for you to share what that is and what you guys do, what your mission is, because I'm a big fan. So I want other people to become big fans with me.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Hunter. So when I was in youth ministry, uh, the, there was a ministry in town called the Chattanooga Youth Network.
Hmm.
And our director, executive director now, his name is Tony Souter, and he had started this ministry 26 years ago. And his whole passion was to come alongside, connect, coach, care for youth pastors. And what that looked like was just sitting across the table from a youth pastor, or starting these area networks where, depending on what region you were in, you'd come together at a local restaurant, a Mexican restaurant or whatever, and just share life together and realizing that we're better together.
Hmm.
And I loved that. And from those relationships, we would do D-Nows together, retreats together, events together, reach a campus together that would just come out organically from these relationships. And so they were so valuable for me. During the year, let's see, it was 2015, I started talking to Tony about some transitions happening with me. And he had developed another ministry and coming out of Chattanooga Youth Network. And he said, I really need someone to come alongside and take up the mantle of me taking those on these networks and these relationships with youth pastors. And it just became a natural transition for me to take that up. And so that's what eventually became Youth Leader Collective. And
Hmm.
so that's what I do. I come sit across the table from youth pastors now, whether it's breakfast, lunch, and helping them be a safe place for them.
Hmm.
So oftentimes youth pastors and pastors in general, people don't realize they're oftentimes preaching community to their people, but they're not in community themselves because there's so much expectation on ministers to have it all together that they don't oftentimes have community themselves. And so they're looking for relationship. And so to be that for ministers has been a great niche for me.
And I can tell you that what Zach is saying isn't just nice wording, because I had that, because I was a youth pastor for a couple of years, and I can remember going to those collectives. I can remember going to breakfast with Zach and just kind of sharing some of the struggles I was having in my ministry. So, just to say, anything you hear Zach talk about today, it's not just nice, fluffy words. I've seen them put into action because they were put in action in my life. So, I've always been thankful for what you guys do. So, real quick, so with you having the name change, do you reach beyond the Chattanooga area, or do you guys still just really meet with youth ministers and youth volunteers in Chattanooga?
That's a great question. So that was part of the reason for the name change is we wanted to give ourselves opportunity to, our first goal is not to necessarily spread outside of Chattanooga, but to be deeper here. Chattanooga, North Georgia areas, we have collectives in Chattanooga, East Brainerd, also North Georgia, Dalton. But we want to give ourselves opportunity if the Lord opens to do coaching and consulting and those kinds of things throughout the country. And God's given us a couple of opportunities to do that. And our sister ministry, the Pray For Me campaign, it is national. That's what Tony is focused on, the intergenerational
Right.
relationship of that. But we wanted to give ourselves opportunities to do that. And we didn't want to neglect our North Georgia friends by just being called the Chattanooga Youth Network.
Right.
But we did want to give ourselves opportunities to do that.
So you guys connect with leaders, Chattanooga, North Georgia, or wherever it might happen, and connecting is a huge part of your ministry. Like I said, I got to experience that and benefit from it, connecting not only with you, but also other youth leaders to bounce ideas off of and things, which I love because that's a heartbeat behind my ministries. I'm wanting to connect Awana leaders and ideas for the sake of the gospel. And so, I mean, that's one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on here because I feel like that's just a niche you guys have is showing the power of Christian connection and community. So I wanted you to just, share a little bit about the value of leaders and volunteers connecting with one another. Like, why do you believe networking among ministries is so vital to their health?
That's a great question, Hunter. First, our theology is community.
Yeah.
We have a Trinitarian gospel. Our theology is based on community. Whether we're talking about, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit have been in community for eternity,
Yeah.
and so we could, don't want to dive too much into that because then I get confused. But we have that right there, and so. But Jesus he even said in John 17 that he preached about how his desire that we would be one, and so we have to fight for community ourselves. And I think ministers, whether you're paid on staff or you're volunteering in your ministry, wherever you are, we have to fight for community, and no matter where we are. And so that's become our real heartbeat ministry of mine, is fighting for that community. And whether someone, no matter where they are, whether they're on staff or not. Just to share you a quick story of how I've seen this impact. And community takes time. I've seen, I've been in this ministry for 4.5 years. Those who have invested in time with one another the longest, I've seen God just use in incredible ways. One of our collectives, we were sitting in a ministry, and there was someone there who was basically sharing that they were getting ready to resign from their ministry position. And it was sort of a mutual resignation between them and their staff. And it was a difficult situation they were in. And they were struggling with anxiety and struggling with some other issues going on. And the collective had become a really safe place for them. And so they were sharing what's going on, and the other individuals there, the other youth ministers, were really loving on them. And there were probably 8 to 10 of us there. And again, when I want people to think about the Youth Leader Collective, I don't want them to think about me. I want them to think about the other leaders there. And this was a great example. So this person was sharing, and she said, I just want you to pray for me. As I leave this meeting, I'm going to resign. I'm going to this meeting that's going to be very hard for me. Well, the next moment, another individual there said, can I just pray for you? I just want to pray and just pray for this next meeting. So she prayed for him as he was getting ready to go to that resignation. As soon as she finished praying, another youth pastor there said, sir, I just want to just say to you, I want you to know that 10 years ago, I was asked to resign from a situation that was not healthy. And when I walked out of that, I felt like God was done with me. Like I was never going to be in ministry. I was struggling with anxiety, many of the feelings that you have right now. It was one of the hardest situations I've ever been in. And he said, but by God's grace, he wasn't done with me in ministry. And at the same time, he had his associate in youth ministry with him right there. He said, this associate was in my ministry, in that ministry at that time. So it was a beautiful picture of God using that moment in just to see God just bring all these things together. That was pre-COVID. It was earlier this year. It was probably in January or February. And just to see God there were tears shed in that moment. It was redemptive. It was beautiful. It was sad. It was all those things, all the emotions.
Yeah.
And I'm still connected with that youth pastor who resigned too. And so it was just to see that impact was encouraging.
There's so many benefits to community. And what I love about the youth collective is you have youth pastors from all different types of churches, all
Yes.
different size churches. And it's just great because you get that perspective. You might have a youth pastor sitting across from you who's been in youth ministry for 10 plus years or 20 plus years, and you're a new guy, and you have so much you can learn from them. And so there's just so much value to it. And there's so much application from what you're sharing to my ministry with Awana, because that's my heartbeat. I want to come alongside these leaders and these volunteers in these Awana ministries and say, hey, how can I be praying for you? How can I help? But not only that, to connect them to other Awana leaders. To say, hey, this church has been doing this for several years. They've got things I know you could learn from. or to even have those moments you're talking about where we're gathered around a table for breakfast or lunch, and to have ministry leaders from different churches, different sizes, where they can pray for one another, share those struggles, give encouragement. And that's just beautiful.
It
And
is.
I love your idea of fighting for community, and it's something we do need to fight for, because our culture very much pushes it's me, it's my truth. I pull myself up by my bootstraps and I make it. But no, Jesus says we need one another. We're better together in this ministry of the gospel. And sure, we have minor differences, but Christ is the king over all of us. And so, you're going to get me preaching, man. It's really exciting, but one thing I can say about my story when it came to starting in ministry was, if you're not connecting with other leaders in ministry, you're more prone to burnout, because you're trying to make yourself go. You're trying to get it all to work. But when you have other leaders speaking gospel truth into you, giving you help, giving you practical tips, that kind of can refuel your spirit and realize, you know what, I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only one who struggles with these things, and there's other people here to help me. And so that's one reason I'm big on connection, is because I feel like too many ministries burn out because they're trying to do it themselves.
That's good.
And, yeah. And so so for anyone watching, listening, find that Christian community within your church, but also outside of your church, so you can get new perspectives and new help and new insights. But yeah, man. Well, Zach, your stories, what you said, you're just preaching to me, man. I love it. So before we wrap up and head out, I wanted to ask you if you had any other insights or any other parting words you would have to share before we wrap up.
One, I just want to say I'm just so excited for you, Hunter. I mean, what you're doing with Awana, the ministry they're doing. I don't have any necessarily more wisdom or insights, but I love how you're preaching community to Awana workers, volunteers, staff. I think that what you're doing is fantastic, especially in this season. If I did have one thing, it would be, we're walking into Pastor Appreciation Month. And I think Pastor Appreciation Month, especially in this season, I know whether it's youth pastors, whether it's pastors, missions, whatever those are, this year has been particularly exhausting for pastors.
Yes.
And so if you're not a pastor, if you are a pastor, whatever it is, encourage your pastors this year. October is Pastor Appreciation Month. Love your pastor, encourage them, send them a card, send them a note, send them a gift card, just send them a word of encouragement in the upcoming month, all year long, of course, but this year has been particularly trying. And so I would just take advantage of this opportunity to encourage your pastor.
I mean, within a couple of months, pastors had to go from not only preaching the word and shepherding their flock, but they had to become IT technicians. And I mean, they had to add so much to their plate in a very short amount of time. Some pastors had never spoken behind a camera before, and that's a very different feeling. And so my heart does go out to pastors during this season, anyone working in ministry, whether you're a pastor, an Awana ministry director, whatever. It's been hard. And so if you've got leadership, show appreciation for that leadership. They need it now more than ever, like Zach was saying. But Zach, that's a great note to end on, because again, that just shows your heart for caring for those in ministry. Our ministries do the best when we serve others best. When we appreciate one another, when we pour into one another. Sometimes I think we can get so caught up in just being busy about the ministry, trying to do more, that we forget, what, we actually would do better if we slowed down at times and just appreciated one another, had seasons of prayer, listening. And so, yeah, Zach, man, this was beautiful. This was great. Definitely want to try and do some more collaborating with you in the future. But yeah, man, God bless you in your ministry. I'm going to be praying for you guys as you continue to connect with youth leaders, and continue praying for us as we connect with the Awana leaders and try to share the gospel with children.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Love what you're doing, Hunter. So glad you're with Awana, man. So excited for you and for Awana.
Yeah, Thanks, man. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for our conversation today. If you have any questions or comments about something that Zach shared or that I shared, send those over to hunterw@awana.org. And also, if you want to learn more about the Youth Leader Collective, you can head to their website at youthleadercollective.com. And as always, if you want to learn more about the Awana Tennessee Network, you can head to our website at awanatn.com. Now, 2 parting words before I leave. First of all, if you want to stay up to date on the latest episodes of our videos and podcasts, then be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel or our podcast channel. And then also, I'd say if you want to see more content like this come out, then you can donate to our ministry. We thrive off the generous support of others. So if you feel led to support our ministry in any way, you can do that at awanatn.com/donate. Well, that's all I've got for you today. I'll see you next time.